We have two other presenters in our session 3. I want to welcome Khalid Hariri and Saeideh Borji, which are both graduate students from the Faculty of Education at Memorial University, with their presentation on intercultural competence in the context of English as a lingua franca.
With more non-native speakers in the world than native speakers, English is used everywhere. So the other night I was invited somewhere and there was a gentleman from Ukraine, and without even noticing, I found myself speaking English, although I knew that this gentleman didn't speak much English. So it is the lingua franca. It's the language that we have to use in any kind of communication when we don't share a language. Now, what was interesting is that the gentleman knew some Arabic words, but still I can't call that a lingua franca because we spoke Arabic together. I can call it a shared language, but I can't call it the lingua franca of the world because I was living in Dubai for maybe 7 years, and in Dubai, whenever I met someone from Brazil or from China or from anywhere in the world, without thinking, without noticing myself, I found myself speaking English because this is the language that we assume that everybody knows in the world and everybody communicates in the world. So this raises the question of who owns English, who owns the language. Is it the native speakers, or is it the people who use this language in their everyday communication? Now, in terms of numbers, if you want to be democratic here, of course, it's not going to be you guys from native-speaking countries. I'm sorry to say this. It's going to be us because we are more than you. We use English every day. Even when I was living in Syria, where English is not a very important language in day-to-day communication, we still had to use English to some extent for certain communication, for export, for import, for whatever kind of communication that had to involve someone who doesn't speak Arabic. So that brings us to another question, actually, which is language descriptive or is it prescriptive? So do we base language on the way it's being used among its speakers? So is the language that I use, with all the mistakes that I make, is it still an English language or not? Now, the problem is that I don't have answers. I have questions, so if you have answers to these questions, you're welcome to tell me. But what I understand, and based on my experience, my short experience in the field, is that it is English is mostly descriptive. It's based on how we use it. Now, I kept thinking about this until I moved to Newfoundland. And in Newfoundland, when I saw people saying to me, "How goes it?" or all these weird structures to me, which are not grammatically accurate, I understood that, yes, language is descriptive. So this emphasizes the fact that we should call English a lingua franca because it's based on descriptions and on the multiplicities of its forms. Now, someone defined, and I don't know how to pronounce their name, but they defined English as a lingua franca as any use of English among speakers of different first languages for whom English is not the first language. Now that means if I'm from Syria and Saeideh is from Iran, so the language that we're using, regardless of whether it's accurate or not accurate, that's lingua franca. And then someone else said, no, English as a lingua franca is, or happens, or takes place when native speakers interact with non-native speakers. Because in that type of communication, we try to amend the language to make it more understandable to the non-native speaker. Now, that is interesting, because if we look at this short video, we will see that even native speakers use English as a lingua franca. Let's see how. Okay, now, where is the mouse? Okay, there.
Is famous for being difficult to understand, but the Glaswegian accent can be even more difficult. There are words and phrases in Glasgow that sound a bit like a foreign language even, so I'm on a mission to find some people to help me translate. Okay, so I love the Glaswegian accent, and I was wondering if you could teach me some local phrases.
Well, it's very hard to bring them to mind, this sort of thing. It's only me as eyes and happy as eyes. You understand?
That is correct English. So when this gentleman speaks English, and maybe I don't know how many of you could understand that English, and I speak English and I make a few mistakes every now and then in my pronunciation or in my choices of words or in my grammar structures, why don't you call it English? Why isn't it good enough as English? Right?
The Scottish accent.
Okay, we saw that. We want to move on. So, what are the features of English as a lingua franca? So, number one, negotiation, which means negotiating the language. So, when sometimes I speak to some of my native speaker friends and I say, oh, you know, like this, I want to buy this thing that you put there, and like, you know, and then there's like, oh, curtains. Oh, yes, curtains. So I have to negotiate the language in order to understand what am I talking about. Number two is, is fluency. So the focus is actually on fluency rather than accuracy, because these differences, and I'm going to talk about this later on, so these differences that we see in the way I speak, grammar, vocabulary, whatever, again, these are maybe, as long as the message is clear and conveyed, these are not mistakes actually, but these are different ways of speaking the language. And this is like, you know, like what you call Singaporean English, not Singaporean English, because they may use certain words that are different. I remember I watched a video by David Crystal, and he was talking about his visit to South Africa, and then somebody said to him, oh, there is a rowboat ahead. And then he said, and I was thinking like, what? Like a rowboat ahead, what does that mean? And then he said, it turned out that traffic light in South Africa is called a rowboat. So these are differences that I will not call them accurate, but I will call them like part of English now, part of the enrichment and the enlargement, let me say, of English. And the third feature of English as a lingua franca is flexibility. So when our students make a few mistakes, but still the message is clear and conveyed, we should be flexible to say, well, okay, now maybe that's not 100% accurate according to grammar books, but still that's English, and they can function with that English. They can go, you know, like work, they can interact with people using that flexible English. Now, enough with English as a lingua franca. Now let's talk about culture. Now, in culture we have two, let's say, categories. So we have first the objective elements of culture, which include everything that we see or hear or listen to. And I know that like postmodernists don't like to say, oh, that we can define culture or we can categorize things. But I'm not, I come from the Middle East. I'm used to like saying, if my dad says this is the way it is, then it is the way. I don't know another way. So we categorize things. So that includes food, behavior, traditional dress, and all these things. And these things, we can teach them. We can change them. So we can feel comfortable sharing. Like I feel comfortable, for example, sharing my food and telling you about Syrian food and how like kibbeh is better than I don't know what, shawarma, for example. But then we have subjective elements which have to do with beliefs, what I think or believe is good or bad, and thought patterns. I don't like to use the word critical thinking because I feel it's very exhausted. And by the way, just like on as a side note, we as international students in like most of the research that I saw, we are criticized for being not good critical thinkers. But yes, we are not, maybe, but like we may have another way of thinking, which is not necessarily wrong. So how about the culture of ELF? Now that we know what, like the two elements, let's say, or two styles, or two categories of culture. So what could be the culture of ELF? I know there is like echo, but this shouldn't touch anything to remove the echo, so yeah, I think this is better. Okay, that's weird. Yeah, I'll move it. So, in the culture of ELF, basically, we rely a lot on asking questions. So, when I was living in Dubai, and people say that maybe there are 200 nationalities in Dubai, and like I don't know how many cultures, maybe so much more, or so many more cultures. Basically, the most important thing was to keep asking questions. So we want to make sure that we understand, and I want to refer actually to Suzanne Fitzpatrick's presentation when she said, don't pick on like certain questions, or don't pick on like students for like certain information, or ask them a lot. So instead of that, what happens is that maybe we can introduce ourselves much more to the culture of our students. So how can this happen? Well, we'll talk about this now. First of all, to start with intercultural awareness, number one is to understand oneself. So me as a student, I want to understand myself. So my teacher should help me to understand myself. What do I believe in? What do I like? What do I don't like? What kind of behavior do I prefer, for example? Number two, which I feel is very important, is exchanging experiences. So let's have students sit in groups and talk about their experiences. So what I see, for example, with the Syrian community over here, is that once we finish school, we go home and we sit all together and we speak Arabic, and we share the same food, and we do the same things that we did in Syria. But guys, we are living in Canada. It's a multicultural country. So what we need to do is to try as teachers, because we are the gateways for like newcomers and newcomer students, whatever like age they are, to a multicultural society like Canada. So we have to think of ways to encourage these students and their parents, depending on the age you're teaching, to exchange experiences, to have like people from different cultures getting together and doing activities together in order to try to break these stereotypes and all these ideas that I might have about people from China or people from Iran or people from Syria. Then it's good to point out similarities and differences. But I will keep that for Saeideh because she's going to touch on that a little bit more. And encouraging, what happened? Oh, okay. You shouldn't look at that last line, please, okay? Pretend it's not there, please. Now for intercultural competence, I'm suggesting quickly appreciating the interference of the first culture. I cannot avoid the fact that I come from a certain culture. So that's both for culture and for language. So the interference of my first culture will be always there. Even when I try to be a global citizen, even when I try to interact with other people with respect, I will still have some elements of my first culture in my communication. Questioning stereotypes, and that is really important, because I was reading something about how curriculum books are fostering stereotypical images about other cultures. So when you go to books that are published by, say, Oxford, or I don't know what kind of like publishing company, you will see the British gentleman who is always successful and who is doing all the good things. And this is a stereotype that is being like implemented in the brain of the student in some way or another. So we have to foster or encourage in our students the questioning of these stereotypes. Not only that, but also stereotypes in the classroom, because like when we look at our classrooms with students coming from Africa, Middle East, Asia, everywhere in the world, South America, and we see how different they are, and basically it's because they haven't talked to each other, because all they know about each other is what they got from a movie, maybe. I was watching with one of my friends the other day a movie about the Middle East, and I was saying like, oh my God, this is not us. Like, I can guarantee you, this is not us, for sure. Like 100%. So that's where we get most of our information, unfortunately. So questioning these stereotypes is very important, and implementing in our students the fact that we should always ask, is this that we see in this movie correct about this culture? You don't have to look at the movie. You have your friend from Eritrea or from Syria. Let's ask them. Let's make a conversation and talk about these things. How do you do these things? So like some people believe that in the Middle East, people marry 4 wives. So I like to bring that into discussion sometimes in my classrooms and say, yeah, oh, what do you think about that? And then the men, like they are happy. Oh yeah, I can marry 4 wives. Like his wife is there and she's like, oh. And I say to him, yeah, I know that, you can do that. You know that in other cultures, a woman can marry 4 husbands. So how about that? And I'm like, so why did your attitude change? So like exchanging these experiences, I feel is really important. I'll leave some time for you. Don't worry. Don't look at me like this. I'll just hide somewhere. Okay. Focusing on similarities, and actually this presentation is based on a paper that I published in April, and the main idea of the paper is how we want a cultura franca, just similar to lingua franca, and we have a lot of similarities between each other. And although we might like practice some of these similarities in like slightly different ways, but still we have these similarities, and that's what Saeideh is going to talk about. Just give me a second. Just give me a second. I like the microphone, I don't like to read the microphone. And then finally, encouraging students to experience each other's cultures. So instead of me representing Syria, how about me representing China today? Or me representing Iran today? Let me try another culture. I don't want to just keep talking about myself. It's like, hey, I'm good, I'm the best, like, and what about the others? Did you try to see what the others are doing? No. Okay, so what? So I think it's really good and important to encourage our students to, try to live the experiences of other people, of other cultures. Now, before Saeideh comes to take the microphone from me, which I don't like actually, I will say just one more thing. And I remember when I started learning French, my teacher, it was like, a completely new language for me, and I use even a different alphabet and completely different. So our amazing teacher, she said, okay, so this is your first class today, so I'm going to list a few words in French that you use in Arabic. And she got maybe 30 or 40 words in French that we use in Arabic, like taxi, bus, television, whatever. And I remember that I went home and I said to my brother, oh my God, I speak French. I know a lot of words in French. Why? Because she started with the similarities. She didn't start with the differences. Now, I will leave it for Saeideh to tell you about the similarities that we found out in that paper. Saeideh, please. Very happy that
Thank you, Khalid, for leaving 1 minute for me.
It's actually fun.
Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Saeideh and I'm a graduate student at Memorial University.
That's enough.
Okay, as Khalid already explained about the concept of English as a lingua franca, it aims that the speakers of various first languages just communicate through any use of English. Similar to the concept of English as a lingua franca, let's say similar to the concept of lingua franca, the purpose of the use of cultura franca is to find some shared values, norms, and morals that all the societies with different cultures share, and then the communicators can use these shared values and morals as a starting point for their communications. There was a study conducted by Hariri et al. In 2019, and he actually studied on 60 societies, 60 different cultures, and then concluded that there are 7 different morals that are the same among all of these cultures. These are actually some cooperative behaviors that are always considered as morally good. The first one is, how did you make the presentation? The first one is family values. I think it's the same in all the societies with all the cultures. We all care about our families. We do like to help our family members, being a loving mother, being a protective father, to help a brother or sister, to care about what your family members does, to feel responsible about their behaviors, to help your family member when they're in need. So all of the cultures believe in these family values, and it doesn't matter where you come from and what culture and background you have. The second one is group loyalty. Group loyalty. Helping a group and group members is also considered as a shared value among cultures. When you actually put yourself at risk to help others, when you when you are willing to take on challenges, when you want to help others, this is something that is considered valuable in all societies, no matter where you come from. Reciprocity. It means to engage with reciprocal cooperation, to trust someone, to return a favor, to let's say feel guilty when you fail to actually return those kind of favors and these things, to fulfill an agreement, to want to actually, do you have any idea on that?
Which one?
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity, yeah. Exchange, like it's the idea of exchanging, you know, like the give and take.
Yeah. Right. And also bravery. Being brave is valuable everywhere. To be brave, to be courageous, to be heroic, especially in a battle. This is also a matter of actually a shared moral among all societies and all cultures. Respect. I think we all believe in respecting our superiors. When you respect your older family members, when you respect your leaders, to be loyal, to be to be obedient to those who lead, to those who have, to those who are older than you, and we all believe in respect, no matter where we come from, no matter what background we have, and also fairness. The concept of fairness is dividing disputed resources rather than fighting over them, dividing the rewards of a collective activity fairly, equally, or according to the efforts and contribution that everyone has. So this is fairness. And the last one would be property. This relates to respecting other people's possessions and properties. To, for example, thieving, stealing and robbing are bad behaviors all over the world. Or using someone else's property without their permission, or do not, if you do not respect other people's homes and personal space, you're not actually respecting their property. And these are some shared morals that are the same among all cultures. Now the teachers can actually use these shared values and they can teach these context in the these things in a ELF, English as a lingua franca context, to emphasize how people from different cultures can behave in different situations. So it can be a starting point of communications. Learners can use these shared patterns to facilitate their communication with people from other cultures when they're working on a team, or actually when they're working under the supervision of a mentor. And the teachers should actually use simple methods to teach these shared commonalities, that so that it would lead to less, and it would lead to avoid stereotyping. As Khalid already mentioned, we should question that. Thank you.
Okay, now, if you're still awake and you have questions, Saeideh will not answer, I will answer. I like the microphone, I'm sorry.
Actually, Khalid, what you talk about and the concept of lingua franca resonates with me a lot, and reminds me of my own situation 10 months ago when I want to leave my country for the first time to living in another country which people in that country speak English, and I only have experience learning English in some private institution and as some courses in the school, but I've never speak English before that, before 10 months ago. And I just shared my concern with one of my professors, and she was actually in the field of TESOL, and she told me that there is no such a thing as English all around the world anymore. English become Englishes, and we have Chinese English, Japanese English, Arabic English, and you can have your own way of communicating with people with Persian English. And I feel it's like a moment, and I feel it's like, so maybe I can pave my way in this path.
Well, even, like English as a lingua franca is a more flexible term than what your supervisor is referring to, because I think your supervisor is referring to world Englishes, and that's the difference. So world Englishes is like Singapore Singlish or Chinglish, but English as a lingua franca is like a postmodern kind of understanding of English, that it's like a flexible, descriptive language to make it, yes, more communicative with people. And unlike Arabic, for example, when I think of Arabic, I don't know if it's the same for Persian or Farsi, but Arabic, it has to be connected to the pre-Islamic poetry. So it's like pre-Islamic poetry is what sets the rules for Arabic, and then we have to follow these rules. And if I try to use Arabic in a different way, then I will be labeled as, wrong. But in English it's different, because English was, in the first place, it was meant to be the language of commerce, and and then after that it became the language of academia as well, and all these things. Any more questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I really just want to comment on that small video clip of Glasgow English, because I experienced it firsthand. I traveled there on the train, and the lady next to me, you know, and talked with me a lot, and I couldn't understand anything. She had no trouble understanding my Chinese English, right? I had trouble understanding her Glasgow English.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it happens to me here sometimes because I work at the Association for New Canadians, and sometimes Arabic-speaking clients come to me with the phone in their hands and like, Khalid, can you talk to them? I don't know what's happening. I don't know who that person is or what's happening. I just like, okay, and then like someone speaks like heavy Newfoundland accent, and then, okay, I want to pretend in front of the seating clients. Yeah, I know what's happening. It's all good. Stay okay. Thank you very much, and